If you're watching this, this is not the first part. Go down in the description. There's also going to be a link to the playlist where you can watch 1 through here to get you caught up on what's going on. How this is going to work is first we're going to go through all the plugins that I used for this mastering chain, and we're going to talk about the plugins I used, the settings, and why I use them. And then for those of you that do not have a studio that's calibrated for a certain level of mixing and mastering, I'm going to show you a couple dirty tricks that you can use in order to basically get your sound and your song to a certain loudness and basically level match the loudness of your track to other tracks using a couple of methods I'm going to show you. So we're going to jump right in. Just know that these settings aren't going to be typical for every track, but you could use this chain if you wanted to and get some good results. But you're going to notice that I didn't use any EQ on this because I did all the EQ within the mix, within the tracks. So you're not going to see me having to do any EQ on my master. So when I'm mastering, I have everything turned on, all these plugins are on, the song's going, I have my whole mastering chain turned on, and I'm able to go back into the mix and do some EQ changes on certain things, tweak some compression here and there, things that I need to fix. However, for this tutorial, to save on processing power so I don't get any skips, what I've done is I've mixed down my whole song as if I was going to send it to a mastering engineer. And what I've done is I brought it into a track and put it on this mix down track that you see right here. So I'm basically going to get rid of all of these right here, all these strips, and that's the only strip that we're going to have. However, I'm not going to put anything on the actual strip here. I'm going to put it on the main out over here so that that's where my mastering chain is going to be. Alright, so here's the mix down. I'll double click on it, and as you can see, if you can see, I'm peaking around -6 dB. That's about, I got about 6 decibels of headroom. You usually want to leave some headroom for the mastering engineer when you're doing your mix down. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this edit view. So here's the track, and you want to go to the loudest part of the track. You find the loud part of the track. We're going to go in this section right here. So I'm going to start it about right there, and I'm basically just going to set a loop, and we're going to listen to this loud part here. I'll set the loop a little longer. Basically a part of the track where there's going to be a lot of stuff going on, and this is what I'm going to use when I'm doing my mastering. Now you should note that that's not going to be the only place that I listen to when I'm doing my mastering. This is just to set some general levels and look at some certain things, and then I'll start playing the song all the way through once I get everything set and see if there's any adjustments I need to make after that in some of the quieter parts. So let's talk about referencing right quick. I have a song here, 8Ball and MJG. The song's So Thick. It's mastered pretty loud, but when you're doing some referencing, and what that means is you're going to take another track that's in the same genre or that sounds the same, has some of the same instruments, some of the same bass, the vocals and stuff that that you like, or just a song you like. What you're going to do is you're going to listen to this song, and you're also going to listen to yours, and you're going to A/B them as you're doing your mastering. And you don't have to do this. This is if you're trying to reach for a certain goal or you just need some help as a guide. Now, since there's so many different ways of doing referencing and monoing and soloing tracks and routing, we're going to do a real simple one that anyone can do so it's not too complicated for some of you. So here's my reference track. Here's the one that needs to be mastered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute my reference track. So let's go over to the mixer and bring that up. Now you see the main output here, basically the main output for the whole program. You'll see I have my mastering chain here because that's typically how I master. But if you're doing a master to something that you mix down and you want to use a reference, what you're going to want to do is you're not going to want to put your plugins over here on this main output. You're going to actually put them on this track where it says mix down, because that's where your track is that needs mastered. Now what that allows us to do is, as this song is playing here and you're messing around with your mastering chain, you're able to solo this, and when you solo this one, the other one automatically mutes. So now I'm able to unsolo it and then hear mine, and then solo this one and hear the reference. Unsolo, and then mine's playing, solo, and now I can hear the reference. Now, since we're talking about referencing, how did you get your track? Did you get it from iTunes? Did you rip it from a CD? Just let me show you something. This is for Windows Media Player, but most programs that rip audio from a disc, if you're getting it from a disc, have certain options you need to make sure that you have checked out so that you're not getting very bad quality that you're trying to reference from. So I'm going to right click here, go to Tools, Options, and if I go here to this Rip tab, you'll see that I have chosen Wave Lossless. You might have MP3 selected, and then you might have this quality slider down here, something like that for 128 kilobits per second. Now when you go to Wave Lossless, you cannot mess with the quality because you're just getting a wave lossless file that is going to rip from the actual disc. Alright, so let's move on. I'll go ahead and close that. Just thought I'd let you guys know about that little tip. So let's actually see what I got. Now, I'm not going to use this reference because I don't need it, so I'm going to unmute that. And there we go. So now I got my audio up here. Let's go ahead and play that. And I want to loop around right here just for now. And we're actually going to see the plugins that I used. So first up was the PSP MasterComp. I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to open it up. I love this compressor for mastering compression, basically. And I'm going to show you the settings I had. Like I said, we're just going to go through, check out the settings I used, and then we'll kind of talk about why it is, and then I'll show you guys a quick, dirty way that you guys can basically get a loud master and do some stuff, some other little tricks. So just stay tuned. All right, so first off, I had a 1.2 to 1 ratio right here. That's the actual compression ratio. The attack was 141 milliseconds. My release was 1.5 seconds, a very long release. I normally have this FAT on when I'm mixing down, but during the actual mastering phase, I don't turn it on because it is a CPU hog. So right before I mix down, I'll make sure I turn that on. That's in the manual what that does. I have the soft RMS, soft knee with a RMS is what it's looking at. And then I have this right here, the side chain. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this down and I can bring it up, right? So what does this do? What this does is it tells the compressor to, not technically, but I'm going to say it this way so you can understand it, to ignore frequencies below, if you see the frequency here, below 119 hertz. Below 119 hertz, the compressor is not going to listen to those frequencies. So what's down there? You got the kick, you got drums, you got bass, stuff like that I don't want the compressor to really listen to when it's doing its compressing. Because if it does, it's going to cause a lot of pumping. Now this is what you can do. I can use my ears to listen. So I'm going to play this. See how much gain reduction? About 1.5 dB of reduction. As I bring this up, you're going to notice that we're getting less jumpiness because we're not really, the kick right now is really affecting this compressor. So I'm going to bring this up. Now see, what I'm listening for is the kick. If I bring it down, even though I got a pretty slow attack time, 141 milliseconds, I can still hear it kind of affecting the kick, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm trying to get that kick to sound the way I want it to where I'm not pulling the life out of it with this compressor at this time. Now, another thing you can do is this little monitor button. I'm going to show you what this does. When I click this monitor button, I'm actually able to monitor what the compressor is listening to. So watch when I take this up to 400, you're going to see that it gets, all the bass just gets sucked out of it, but I'm just trying to monitor what's being affected. Watch. So basically what that's allowing me to do is just monitor what the actual compressor is listening to. I get to listen to exactly what the compressor is going to be listening to when it's compressing. You can also allow it to not really compress on the high-end frequencies by bringing this down too. Now this is my actual threshold control that actually starts to enact compression. So I'm going to play it and start to bring this down, and you're going to notice I start to get compression. Now, what I'm shooting for is, I'm not really looking at it saying, you know what, I only want 1 dB of reduction, but I really don't want to go too much above 1 dB. But I'm also listening to the sound that it's doing, what it's happening, everything, okay? I'm listening to a lot of things. This attack and release isn't typical. I mean, it could be different per song, so that's just something you need to know about. Now this little section here, I'm not really going to mess with this, and I'm not really going to go too in depth with it because I don't need to, but this is your tilting for your stereo field, and you can balance between the left and the right, and you can do a high pass and low pass. This is inside the manual if you want to learn more about this, but I'm not messing with this because I don't really need to mess with this part, okay? That's just if you get a track that has an imbalance between the left and the right, you can do some adjustments of the stereo field. Now, this is the wet-dry slider if you're trying to do some parallel compression. I'm not trying to do that with this plugin, so I'm not going to use that. This is an output knob, but this has to do with the limiter when it's engaged, and that's basically what that has to do with. I'm not messing with that because I don't have the limiter engaged. This is the actual output makeup gain right here, which I'm also not going to use because I don't need to, because I have 6 decibels of headroom. I've actually probably gained a little bit more headroom using this compressor because I got 1 dB of reduction. I don't really need to mess with any gain right here because I'm going to do that with my final limiting inside my actual whole plug-in chain. All right, so that's what we got going on with this. Let's just check it one time. All right, now I typically don't do this, but I brought in the glue. It's SSL emulation. It's a really good plugin. It's by Cytomic. Now check it out. Now many mastering engineers do not like it when you do this. They don't like it when you heavily compress on the output because you love the way something sounds. I love the way the glue sounds, and I typically don't do this, especially this much, what you're going to see, but it depends on a couple of things, and the reason I'm doing it is because the vocals are kind of hot on this track, the way I mixed it, compared to the instrumental and stuff. So I want to kind of bring the vocals. I don't want the vocals to sound too separate from it or too loud. So what I've done is I use this to kind of bring the vocals into the mix a little and gel everything together. Now you typically wouldn't do this, as I've said, and if there's a mastering engineer or some mastering engineers watching this, they're going to be like, oh my God, this guy's showing them this. So again, I don't do this. This is a special situation where I decided to use this. I can actually get away and I do not have to use this at all. I'm using it for the effect that I'm going. So you can actually just ignore this part, but it's something you could try out and see how it sounds. But I'm using a very high ratio here. A slow attack of 30 milliseconds. I'm using a 600 millisecond release. This is your range, and you can basically limit compression to, let's say, 4 dB, 3 dB. I don't need to do that because I'm just going to use my eyes. I don't need to set a range. This is your dry wet knob where you can also, once again, do some parallel compression. I'm not going to be doing that. And then this is actually another high-pass filter, which I love about this compressor, is that because it's not on the SSL model, but I can actually do a high-pass and then, once again, not allow the compressor to listen to the lower frequency. So let's check out how much compression. I think I might have messed with this. Creep, swine, yeah, hope, yeah. You know better than to fuck with me. Holding up a red, no luck gets these. No, get my cruise control, yeah, better settle savage. Get my music roll, yeah, it's more than average. I ain't gotta prove shit, who be bad? Ain't about to lose this shit. Now, when you do something like this, you want to barely touch it, okay, and you want to just listen, okay? Because you don't want to use your eyes and say, oh, I'm barely touching, I'm only getting 1 dB reduction, okay, I'm good. You want to listen to what it's actually doing. And I can hear what it's doing. You might not really understand what's going on, some of you, but I can hear what it's doing. I like what it's doing. And it's gelling everything together, the vocals to the instrumental, some of the instruments together, and it sounds really nice to my ears. So that's what I had up next. But like I said, once again, I could actually just omit this whole plugin, forget about it, and move on and not even use this. And then my vocals are just going to seem a little bit more louder. They're going to seem a little bit more separated, but you may not even notice that because a lot of tracks coming out now, they're doing it to where, well, they've been doing it forever, but a lot of tracks coming out because they're in this loudness war thing. And if you want to know what that is, just Google it, loudness war. And a trick that you can use in the loudness war is, well, guess what? Just turn your vocals up and have your instrumental just a little bit lower. You'll have hot vocals, but guess what? Your vocals are going to be loud, you know, because a lot of rap tracks, you know, the kick and some of the instruments, really the whole track, right? But when you're coming down to the loudness war stuff, the kick and then you have a lot of bass and boom, 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 and then you have the vocals really loud. It seems like the track's really loud. So you put your track next to theirs, your vocals are going to seem low because you mixed a certain way that you did compared to the way they did, and they mixed their vocals hotter. So what I did on the vocals for this track is I didn't mix them that hot, okay? But I mixed them hot enough to where I felt, again, I'm explaining why I did this, I felt that I needed to use the Cytomic. So we can just omit it for the sake of keeping everything kind of dynamic. So the Ferric TDS plugin is basically saturation, tape emulation / tape compression type plugin that adds some nice juiciness. It can actually increase the perceived loudness of your track just by adding some saturation and doing some dynamic processing. You can also gain a little bit more headroom and basically smooth over some more of the stuff inside your track and make it sound silky smooth, stuff like that. However, it's very subtle. You got to be able to know. You might not even be able to hear this right now. And even if you were listening to this, some of you probably wouldn't even be able to, if you haven't been doing this for a while, you probably wouldn't be able to catch on to what's happening. Just know that it's doing some good stuff here, okay? Now, I didn't use it in this track, but I use it if I'm not going to be using the Oxford Inflator or some other type of saturation, if a track even needs it at all. Sometimes tracks do not even need this. I felt it did, so I used it. However, if you're trying to buy into the loudness war and you're trying to really pump your stuff up, well, you could use this and the Oxford Inflator together, which I'll show you, which would increase the apparent loudness of your track without even really gaining too much gain or losing too much headroom. So I'm not really going to explain it in depth because you can always read a manual and go find the plugin, but just as your saturation knob, this can increase your saturation, your harmonic saturation, and make things sound louder. This is your dynamics, mimicking like tape compression when you hit the tape, kind of depending on how hard you hit it, right? And then you have right here an input knob, so that if your input's too low, you can drive this input up to basically drive it into here. So let's play this right quick. You see I'm coming into the 5. I could actually drive this a little hotter. You see what I was doing as I started to bring this up? It started to get a little hotter. Let me bring that. I just hold the control key on the keyboard and I click it and it goes back to center. So, and over here there's some compression. Right here's a side chain. I have that engaged. And basically I used it by ear, but it's probably whatever half a 250 is. So I use this by ear and I'm basically once again telling the compressor not to really mess with the lower frequencies. This is my recovery or release mechanism, and basically it's allowing me to set the release of these dynamics right here. You can see what I have it set to right there. That's once again, you got to use your ear. I don't want too much compression with this plugin. I'm just kind of giving it just a little touch. Because I could compress the hell out of it, but that's not what I'm doing. All right, and then now this is, you're barely even going to hear this, people, okay? But I'm going to bring it down, and then I'm going to bring it up, and you got to know what to listen for, but you can actually hear it get a little louder. So here we go. Very subtle. Now, the more you drive this into the plug-in and the higher this is hitting over here and the more saturation you give it, it's going to get even louder, okay? But this is what I used, and this is your trim. Once you get everything set up, a good thing you can do to actually hear what's happening with this plug-in, and a lot of plug-ins, is you see this trim knob? Basically, it's called also a compare knob. What happens is, I do all this saturation, compression, and it gets louder, right? Well, when you listen to something that's quiet, from what I heard, like what if it's bypassed, and then I turn it on, it's going to sound a little bit louder, and I'll be like, yeah, man, this sounds better. But in order to hear what it's actually doing to the actual sound, what you can do is, you can use your trim knob. So what you do is, you play it, and as you're playing it, you're going to hit this bypass button. And I can hear this. You may not be able to hear this depending on your listening environment right now. When I bypass it, it gets a little quieter. Then when I bring it back in, it gets a little louder from all the processing that's happening. Well, what I can do is, I want to see how it sounds. What a lot of people do is they want to see how it sounds without the loudness increase, because the loudness increase is going to trick us to make us think it's better. So what you do is, you bypass, unbypass it, and I say, okay, it's a little loud. So now what I'm able to do is I'm able to bypass and unbypass. It still has all the processing going on, but since this is the main output for this whole plugin, I'm able to compare the actual processing and sound at the same level, which allows me to really make a judgment on, do I really like what this thing is doing? Now, you don't really have to do it, because if you already know what's happening and you're pretty good at this stuff, you don't really need to be messing around with the trim. But it's just something you guys need to know about, and I thought I'd talk about it. All right, so I'm going to close this, turn it off. We're going to bring up the Oxford Inflator and check that out. So the setting that I used was around 33 or something like that, okay? Now, I'm not going to go really in-depth to this plugin, but let me tell you something about this plugin and the actual company. And reading the manual, RTFM. I've said it before, RTFM, you may have heard about it. Read the frickin' manual, or read the fucking manual, whatever. If you were to take all the manuals for all these plugins I'm showing you in this whole entire series, and you were to read all the manuals, you're going to come out knowing a lot about audio and audio production, and because a lot of these manuals have a lot of good tips in them, they have a lot of good info that you can learn from, so I really think you guys need to start reading your freaking manuals. So this specific plugin inside the manual is really big for this little plugin. I mean, look at it. It's not much, but it goes into a lot of stuff. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what band split is and this and what that does and what curve does. Just know I'm going to show you something, okay? This plugin, now this has nothing to do with mastering what I'm going to tell you, but if you take like an SSL emulation like the Glue and throw it on some vocals or something that sounds really good on vocals, some kind of compressor, and then you throw this Oxford Inflator on there on the vocals, and then you start to drive it, go try it out. See how it sounds. If you can get your hands on this plugin or, demo it or something, you're going to love what this thing does to vocals. If you're trying to give the vocals a nice warm, open, not really open, but a nice warm sound, oh my God, this is heaven on vocals, okay? A lot of people don't know about that stuff, about using this Oxford Inflator for vocals, but it can really warm up some very stale vocals. So let me show you what happens, okay? I'm going to bring it up. It's going to get louder, and then I'm going to bypass it, and then I'm going to bring it in. Now, we're affecting the whole song because this is on the mastering chain. So here we go. You know what? Let's go find another part of the song that's really getting annoying. Okay, so we'll go over here. Just in case. So I'm gonna bring it up again. Can you hear how it gets louder? And a lot of you are like, oh yes, it gets louder. That is so awesome. I'm gonna go make everything freaking louder with this thing. Okay, that's cool and all, but check it out. Can you just come in here, flip this thing on, use the exact settings you see here, and just crank this bad boy up and get a louder track? Well, of course you can. You will. But check it out. You don't want to use it too much, okay? Because what's going to happen is it's going to kind of fatigue your ears. It's going to seem everything's going to seem really hot and jumbled together. It's kind of hard to explain, but listen to it as you're using this plugin and listen for what you're listening for. You'll hear what I'm talking about if you drive it too much. So what I'm using it for is I'm using it for a little bit of saturation. I'm also using it to bring up in the end, I am using it to bring up the apparent loudness of my track. Also, I'm kind of cheating here. Not cheating, but I'm using something at my disposal to make something louder. So yeah, that is kind of my motive, but I'm also doing it because I feel like the track needs it. They want the truth. I ain't trying to have it smooth, but what about the youth? They force fed from the cool lies of the fake dreams achieve that glitz and glam. So that's about good right there. So the Oxford Inflator, pretty cool plugin. And once we're all done, we'll show you how I did that actual mastering, because I had everything going. I had all these plugins engaged for this track, in case you're wondering. I had the Glue going, I had this one going. Let's bring up the Glue. They want the truth. I ain't trying to have it smooth, but what about the youth? They force fed. They want the truth. I ain't trying to have it smooth, but what about the youth? They force fed from the cool lies. They want the truth. I ain't trying to have it smooth, but what about the... So I had all these going. Now, for some people and for some mastering engineers, they'd be like, "Wow, my God, that's a lot of stuff." But just for the tutorial, so I ain't blowing your ears off, I'm going to turn those off. Okay, I'm going to turn off the Oxford Inflator. So now we're going to get to that final part of the mastering where I did my actual limiting, and we're going to talk about that. Now, for the final plug in the chain, it's right here, Ozone 5 Maximizer. Now, you have Ozone 5 Advanced that has all the plugins in one plugin, and you can also use them separately. I'm using the Maximizer or the limiter only for the final limiting, which we're going to cover here shortly, but we're going to talk about metering before I crank it on and show you what I did. So let's talk about metering here. I'm going to bring up a spectrum analyzer. Now, as I've said before, somewhere in this tutorial series I mentioned using a spectrum analyzer, and even though we use our ears, you can also use your eyes to verify certain things, that what you're hearing, yeah, you know what, I can also see it on the spectrum analyzer. So for the overall mix, if I'm looking at this spectrum analyzer, now you can't look at a spectrum analyzer and just look at it and be like, oh no, we got too much frequency in this range, around 2 kilohertz. I think I might want to fix that. It needs to be perfectly flat all the way across. Like you see this little guideline that's on here. Not all plugins have this, but this one does. It's like a reference line for a nice little taper that, would be perfect in the real world. But check it out. All tracks aren't going to have that. It depends on the instrumentation and a lot of things. I'm not getting into spectrum analyzation and stuff like that and what we're looking for. What I will tell you is that you might see a lot of people use them. And like I said, You're verifying with your eyes what you hear, and that's what I use it for, and that's what a lot of other people use it for. And there's a lot of other reasons to get used, but so you might see those. You can go ahead and throw that. That needs to go at the end of your whole entire chain, but of course when you mix down, you want to turn it off. Now, let's talk about loudness metering. So a lot of companies attempt to make, or they do make, loudness metering and loudness meters plugins that allow you to look at the loudness of your track so you can do it to a certain level. Some of them are very complicated that I'm not going to get into, like some from the Waves, and some of those, they're like got a lot of stuff that has to do with broadcast and other things. But we're going to show you one right now where I'm going to show you one. Me and myself and I, if I say where. One that's really simple that you guys can use with great effects is from T-Rex. It's part of the T-Rex package. It is this meter here. It's got a spectrum analyzer. It's got a little spectrum analyzer over here that you can adjust the settings for all kinds of stuff. And you can adjust the loudness suggestions for what this little green and red over here. So right now it's set on pop rock, which is pretty hot. And you have your RMS level. This is your RMS level. I'm sitting around -20, and this is the perceived loudness. Now, and this is your peak value. You got a phase meter and a correlation meter over here. Not going to get into all that, but check it out. This is probably what a lot of you guys care about, is this loudness area. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at my RMS value, which is the value that you're going to be looking at a lot when you're starting to get towards, because again, you guys don't have, some of you don't have calibrated systems. That's why we're going to be using the meters and some other stuff. So most tracks are around, that's where it comes into your reference. You listen to a reference that's as loud as that you like, that you're listening to, like, you know what, I love this song. I want my song to sound like this, about this loud, so that when I play it, it sounds awesome. So what you can do is you can use your reference. Now, remember how we're using the reference? We have all these plugins over here. Now, I know I told you to do that with all your plugins, but the plugins that are basically don't need to go over there are your metering plugins. All your metering plugins, if you're doing this reference style stuff, you can have all these plugins right here, over here. All right, so they're all over here. Just imagine. Use your imagination. I hope you guys have one. So all those plugins are over here, and we're doing the reference style now, okay? And check it out. All my metering plugins, these two, let's say just the T-Rex metering plugin, I have that over here by itself on the main. So that the reason why I have it over there is so that when I solo my other track, I can actually look at the loudness that it's suggesting for that track compared to mine. And then I would bring mine within level. So let's see what it says the perceived loudness of my track is. Well, it's not even on the scale. So that's when the final limiting is going to come in, and then we're going to be able to bring up that perceived loudness. So just so I'm not confusing anyone, because I know some of you guys are probably slower than others and getting lost and tripping over your freaking shoelaces right now. So check it out. If you're going to be doing the reference way, where you have the mix down over here like I do right now, and you have a reference of the song that you like, you're going to have all your plugins right here for mastering, all the way up until your limiter also. However, what I recommend you doing is having the actual analysis plugins over here. The reason why I'm telling you not to put your limiter over here is because guess what? Now, there are some ways to handle this differently, but I'm going to try to make this stuff simple for you guys. Have your limiter over here, because if you put it over here, how are you going to A-B this? If I go solo, well, now I'm running this actual whole track through the limiter. That's going to limit this track even more. It's going to sound crazy, right? Well, guess what? You don't want to do that. So you're going to have all your limiter and everything over here, only your analysis plugins over here. I don't know how much more simpler I can make that. Analysis plugins, mastering plugins. All right, so check it out. This is what I'm going to do. I put another track on here. It is Do or Die, the song Do You, but I can't play because I don't have the rights, and the next thing you know, they're hitting me up for copyright infringement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a mixer, and you're still going to be able to hear my voice, but you're not going to be able to hear the audio, but you'll be able to see the analysis. So now when I play this, I'm going to bring up my analyzer here, T-Rex, turn it on, and I'm going to play the song, and like I said, you're not going to be able to hear it, but it's playing right now. I can't even hear it, but I'm watching it. And as we see this, now I'm in the hook section where they're actually singing. We got the hook off to the left and the right. The loudness is just crazy. And I'm watching this, and as you can see, the perceived loudness and the RMS. A really hot song right here, okay? This is really, really, really pushed it. Now, I'm not going to go over too in-depth about how to read metering, but when you're looking at this, I can tell that a lot of that's bass, okay? The bass is really going to push these meters up. That's why you'd, of course, have to be listening to the song. Because as you're watching your metering for your loudness or whatever you might be watching, you're also listening to the bass and all the other instruments. And when you learn how to do metering for songs, what I recommend is that you put a whole bunch of songs in your DAW and you watch them and you analyze them with spectrum analyzers, with loudness meters, and you'll start to learn what to look for as far as when you're listening and what you're looking and what you're seeing on the screen, what correlates to a certain loudness. Now, as I've said, I have my studio calibrated to a certain listening system sound level, and I'm able to use my ears and just use loudness alone and know this is where I need to be. All right? And I can also listen to what else you can do is, besides all this, is no meters whatsoever. Mute this. Unsolo it, go to yours, this one, and then bring your limiter down some more, and then, oh, you know what? That's still not the same loudness. Crank up your limiter some more, which we're going to go over the limiter in just a second. Basically, increase the volume of your track as you listen and solo between the two, because you're going to have your limiter and all your plugins over here. And then once you are level matched, you're level matched, okay? So let's go back to this thing here, and let's talk about this. So we're going. It's not playing because I have it. Because it's not on. Thanks for telling me, folks. So we can see this track's pretty hot. They're around -8 RMS, somewhere around here. This is where they're at. Now, I know it's bumping up here, but there's stuff going on. They're around -8, dude. This track was mastered really hot. This perceived loudness, it's if you read the manual, it talks about how they're doing that. Now, what you could do is have like 4 other tracks and analyze these, and you can now you see it's clipping right here. So that's another thing I should probably tell you guys about. When you do a reference, when you do on a reference, when you do a reference, just understand that it might clip. You might find yourself with a reference in here. For some reason, you're clipping on the master. You're like, why do I keep clipping? Some masters are basically, they use soft clipping and it gets a little bit more loudness. I'm not going to go too in depth into other stuff that has to do with that. But you might get some clipping on the master when you solo this one. Don't be too worried about it. So moving past the referencing and metering and all that kind of stuff, I hope you guys get a pretty good gist of how to do that kind of stuff. I'm going to mute the actual reference, and we're going to focus once again on the final mastering of the actual track that's on there, my track, on the mix down. We got our plugins over here, and we're going to check something out. So yeah, and now I'm going to ensure that the loudness isn't too much. I'm going to bring this up as I'm playing it.
Better than to fuck with me, holding up a red and no luck gets these. No, get my cruise control, yeah, better settle savage. Get my music roll, yeah, it's more than average. I ain't gotta prove shit, who be back.
Now, I won't blow your ears off or the doors off your house when I bring up this mastering limiter. So, we all know all these plugins are going now. Let's go check out the final plugin in my chain was this Oxford, sorry, no it wasn't. It was the Isotope Ozone Maximizer. Only using the maximizer. I'm not going to go in depth on dithering. That's a big subject, okay? And I'm not going to go too in depth. I'm just going to show you what this plugin does and tell you how to get your music louder. So a lot of you are like, man, I mixed down my song. It's not loud as the other songs when I put other songs on the disc. Well, we all know, and you know now, it's because you didn't master it. And I'm going to show you how to get it louder. So what you do is you come into the plugin here, you load it up, you see this margin, you need to ensure that you have it set to about -0.1. Some people, intersample clipping, stuff like that, they put the -0.3. That's up to you. You could put it here, turn intersample detection on, and then you'll be good. I'm not going to have it on because I'm not really worried about it. I'm choosing the IRC2. Now, if you choose something like hard or soft, that's when you have control of your release parameter. But since I'm choosing this, if you read the manual, it talks about how now we have a selection of characters, okay? I'm using about 1, somewhere around there, which they call fast and loud. They've assigned like what they believe a name to that character should be. Now, the transient recovery, I had that on. The setting I chose for transient recovery for this song was 48.4, somewhere around there. Stereo linking, when you turn this on, you can mess with the stereo linking. I'm not messing around with that. I don't need to for this master, so I'm not messing with that. Now, dithering is a touchy subject, but I will tell you that when I mixed down to MP3, I didn't add any dithering. I just left it off. I went straight to MP3. I do have the DC filter on. Now, everybody has their own And you really got to have a good monitoring system to be able to hear the dither and what it's doing and stuff like that. And that's getting into the auto fidelity stuff that most of you don't even need to concern yourself with unless you're going to go study up on it, okay? So I didn't use any dithering because I'm not burning it down to a disk. I'm not going to 16-bit for, WAV files for a disk. I just going to MP3, so I didn't turn none of this stuff on. So can you turn it on when going to MP3? Yes, but I chose not to. So DC filter is on. This basically removes all the DC offset. I wouldn't say all, but it removes DC offset. And it comes before dithering, okay? And so that's all that. Now, how do we make it louder? Well, it's real simple. You see this little threshold? As I bring this down, the song is going to get louder. But we've set the limiter, which is not going to allow the sound to go above negative 0.1. So it's not going to clip. It's not going to get distorted. But we can distort it. You can bring it up too loud to where you're cutting off too much stuff and you're going to start getting distortion. So I'm going to first show you what I did, which I can't really hear it because I have my monitoring turned down, but I know that it was about -6. I pulled this down about -6 for the limiting. So let me go ahead and do that. Now listen to how it gets louder as I bring this down.
You know better than to fuck with me. Holding up a red and no luck gets these. No, jam my cruise control, yeah, better settle savage. Let my music.
Hear how it's louder? I bypass it.
Ain't gotta prove shit, who be bad? Ain't about to lose this, you need practice. Yeah, me on the streets, beats bang.
Okay, so we know it gets louder. Now, again, I'm not here to explain the plugin how it works because it's got all kinds of different views you can set in here. Right here, this is the actual, as you're doing your limiting, it'll actually show you a graph of like how much it's limiting. And you can also watch here, this is the actual gain reduction. You'll watch the two little things come down. And you can see we're getting like 2.3 decibels of reduction. Now, let's go into how much you're going to do this. Well, here's a quick fast thing that a lot of you guys, once again, if you're trying to do your own mastering and bring your stuff up, you don't want to be doing too much limiting. You don't want to be doing this crazy stuff right here. You can just hear the distortion, right? And it just doesn't sound that great. Now, a quick guide, quick rule for all you people. I remember I'm going to come back and show you guys some dirty stuff, all right? So we are not done with that. I'm going to show you guys the dirty, all right? But I'm trying to be conservative here for the loudness war. And because I'm probably going to get a lot of people in the comments saying, oh my God, you're showing these guys just how to destroy music, from all those people. But check it out. A quick guide that you can use is bring it down till you hear some distortion that you're not going to like. And then you're going to start to bring it down to where you don't have any distortion, but it's loud. But that isn't what I'm doing when I'm mastering. When I'm mastering, I'm actually, like I said a million times, have my monitoring calibrated. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. Go Google it. How to calibrate your listening environment. You're going to need an SPL meter and some other things to a certain listening level, okay? It's going to deal with test tones and all kinds of things like that. Some pretty scientific stuff, huh? Now, I'm able to use my ears and bring this level down, and then I'm able to know if it's loud enough. And I can also use some metering, some loudness metering if I want. However, for you guys who don't have that opportunity to have your stuff calibrated properly, here's what you can do. Bring it down until you hear degradation, or the sound quality basically sounding like crap. It sounds like crap right there. The bass is totally getting chopped up. I'm just using that term. That's not being specific, but it's really crushing that bass, right? That's way too much limiting.
You know better than to fuck with me. Holding up a red and no luck gets these. No, jam my cruise control.
That's more better. What I have done is now, remember I had like 6 decibels of headroom, but of course I ate. Headroom is basically from the top of the peaks or whatever to how much room before you hit 0. 0 in the digital realm, above that would be clipping and distortion and getting into, I'm not going to get into soft clipping and stuff like that to increase loudness too, which is another trick because this is ended up turning into kind of like a mastering tutorial, but I'm not giving you a mastering tutorial because on my mastering DVD, it's 9 hours long. I have a mastering DVD, well, not a mastering, I have a mixing and mastering DVD tutorial on DVD that goes in, the mastering section alone is 9 hours, okay? So you're sitting there for 9 hours. It's more scripted and to the point, unlike this tutorial, which is free flow, because you guys, we're just hanging out, man. But it's more to the point, and it's so in depth when it comes to mastering. Just know that you need to bring it down, make it louder. There you go. It's going to be louder. Just don't do it too much because it's going to sound like crap. Now, as you bring your mastering thing down and you get it to where you want it, that's when you can start doing your comparing, where you solo this and you unsolo. But then once again, I don't want to confuse you guys because all these plugins would be over here now if you're going to be doing the referencing. So when I'm talking about referencing, all your plugins are over here. So my isotope's over here. And then as I solo it, I've already said this, but I'm saying it again, I can hear, and if I don't think it's as loud as the reference, I can crank it up some more. Close it, solo it, unsolo it, say, you know what? I'm still not as loud as the reference. Come back into my limiter. You could actually just have this open as you're doing it. I just, I can go like this, and then I can go, you know what? Nope, still not as loud. Still not as loud. Oh my God, let's just crank it all the way up and crack everything all to hell, right? So you get the drift here, right? I hope you guys understand. If you don't understand what I'm saying, just send me a message and say, you know what? You had me totally lost, man. I was in a cave somewhere with aliens, and they kidnapped me, and I don't know what the hell's going on, what you're talking about. So moving on. Now, I believe I ended up going somewhere around here. I'm not sure where it was, because I'm not going to be able to hear it, and I don't, like I said, my monitoring system, I have this all turned down for the tutorial, so I'm not going to be able to actually do what I did, but...
You know better than to fuck with me. Creep swinging, you know better than to fuck with me. Holding up a red, no luck gets these. No, jam my cruise control, yeah, better settle savage.
And then let's go back to my really loud part, which I'm there. I'm there at the loud part. Let's go to a quieter part here. Hear how that sounds? What the hell did I just do? Oh, totally messed up my routing here. Sorry, folks. Boom.
I never see that mama crying in their reticle. I ain't gotta prove nothing never to nobody.
See how we're getting a little bit less limiting in this quieter part?
See that mama crying in their reticle.
When I'm doing my final limiting, I really, really like to go to the loudest part of the song. So I would stick to this little section over here that's really loud, and I would basically stick it around in this area as I'm doing my limiting. Of course, towards the end, I would listen to the whole song all the way through with the limiter on and basically listen. And then, I would make my judgments there. So now, I know this has been long, guys, but we're about to get into the nitty-gritty, dirty stuff, and I'm going to keep it all in this tutorial. You guys, we're done. I mean, that's pretty much what I did to the whole track, and then I mixed it down, and then I got my master. But next, I'm going to talk about multi-band compression and some tricks you can use for analyzing the loudness of your song, another way that you can see how loud yours is compared to another's. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go into a let's do this dirty and get crazy with it. Let's just make our shit loud. So let's check out this loudness meter here. I turned it on after my mastering total everything, the limiting and all that. Creep swinging, you know better than to fuck with me. Holding up a red, no luck. I'm sitting around, negative 11 RMS, negative 10. That would be good, but, since we're into the loudness war and all that, let's just crank this up some more. Creep swinging, you know better than to fuck with me. Holding up a red, no luck gets these. No, jam my cruise control, yeah, better settle savage. Let my music roll, yeah, it's more than average. I ain't gotta prove shit, who be bad? Ain't about to lose this, you need practice. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix this down. You're not going to see that part. I'm going to bring in the mastered version, and we're going to check some stuff out. So here's the mastered version. Let's go check that out, shall we? There's a thing inside Studio One. A lot of programs don't have this. Now, in your program, you can probably right-click, and somewhere it can say Analyze File, and then it'll give you like an RMS value. It might be called Statistical Analysis, like it's called in Adobe Audition. But I can go to the project page, and I've already dropped a song that I would kind of like want my loudness to match. And it's something by Tupac called Run the Streets. Because back then they weren't mastering super hot. It's like a conservative master. It's not super hot, and there's a lot of dynamics. And then here's mine right here. Now, what you can do in here is you can click on the track. detect loudness. It's got its own little dynamic range meter here, and it tells me the loudness. Negative 9.7, it's about negative 9.5 RMS, okay? So, and it's got a dynamic range of 8 for their value. Now, let's check mine out, and we'll go loudness, detect loudness. Here we have mine's a little louder at negative 8.4. Now, just because your value says that it's negative 9 and then this one's negative 8, just know that the closer you get to 0, the louder it is. Because 0 would be the loudest, and then like negative 14 would be quieter than negative 8. So I know it sounds backwards, but that's just the way it is. Now, just because this says negative 9.7, negative 9.7, and then this one says negative 8.4, it doesn't mean that mine's going to be louder, okay? Because the RMS that it's using, I'm not going to get too in depth, but it has to do with frequency and stuff like that. Maybe mine has more bass and stuff like that in it, which is going to cause a little bit higher reading, depending on how you have it tailored and how they have their RMS value set up and how it's being monitored. So you can't really judge it by looking at the RMS value. You can use it as a guide, though, and say, you know what? Mine's pretty loud. I actually mastered it pretty hot, okay? I wouldn't do it this loud, but I did. Remember, I said, let's just go into the loudness war, and I brought that level down on that. I basically increased the level on the maximizer and then chopped the heck out of it, right? So it's pretty hot. It's actually, and I know it is louder than this one, but I'm not going to play it because I can't, because I don't own Run the Streets. That's Tupac's, right? So let's talk about the dirty stuff, what you can do. So if you want to be quick, fast, and in a hurry, and you just want to get your song loud, you have it mixed everything the way that you want, and you know what? You don't really want to mess with the master, with compression and EQ. You just want to get your track louder. Well, you just throw a limiter, and you bring the limiter, and you bring down the threshold, as we did over here. You know, you bring your threshold down, and it gets louder, right? Well, here's my non-mastered one. Here's a song that I want to emulate. I know that the mastering level at this one is about an RMS of 10 or negative 9.5 RMS. I want to shoot for that RMS level. Well, you can do some calculations. I could go click on this one, detect the loudness. Now, in your program, you might right-click and say, do a statistical analysis, do a loudness, something, whatever your program has. Find out what it is. I'm sure it has it. And it will tell you what the RMS value is. Mine says negative 18. Well, this one is negative 9. Well, let's do some calculation. I'm just going to round it off to negative 10. So this one's at negative 10, and mine's at negative 18. All you got to do is subtract those, and that's how much you need to put into your limiter to get into the ballpark. So let's go 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That's 8. 10 to 18 is 8 dB. I need to bring this one up 8 decibels for it to be negative 10. Okay? Now, if you want to be more crazy, you could bring up a calculator. Here we go. Got a handy-dandy little calculator. And you can go, okay, so this is negative 9.5. We'll just use the negative 9.5 value. So I'll just go, but we need to use the higher number, 18.2. And I'm going to go 18.2 minus 9.5. You got to talk like a robot when you do it. Equals 8.7. So now I just go into my limiter and I go negative 8.7. Hold the shift key and I can be more, there we go. And then I mix it down, and then when I bring it back, and then I come in here and then I analyze it, mine should, it's not going to be exact, it's going to be within the loudness of, because we basically just found out what the RMS is, and we basically increased that RMS by bringing up the whole entire track through the limiter, right? So there you go. That's a quick little way, if you guys are looking for a dirty way to get your stuff loud. Just find the track that you like, analyze it, see what the value is compared to the one that you have. Just throw a limiter on your song. So don't put anything else. Just throw your limiter, turn it on, and then use that value that you found, negative 8.7, which was the difference. Mix it down, and then go check and see, and it might be over, it might be a little bit under, but you'll be within the ballpark. So let's talk real quick about the final thing I want to talk about, and it's something that probably a lot of you are probably wondering at this point.